They'll give me 5 minutes. There you go. Church, I want you to be encouraged to see this many young people sitting in church. There are small country churches out there that would give their right arm to have this many young people sitting in church this morning. So I want to really thank and encourage our leaders for their commitment to what is a very important part of our ministry to young people in this church. Our church would not be what it is today without ministries like this. See how quickly I can get through this. Superheroes. Kids, we live in an age where everyone has their superhero, and they're usually cartoon heroes that are larger than life. They have superhuman powers, seem to be able to defy the laws of nature and conquer death itself. And yet we all know that this is not reality. This is just fantasy. And yet there are superheroes in the Bible. Did you know that? There are superheroes in the Bible. And what differentiates a superhero in the Bible from the superheroes in popular culture is that these people were men and women of faith. And we know that faith was their secret weapon. That is what set them apart from the culture around them. And I was going to share with you the story this morning of David's mighty men. And I'm going to cut through it really quickly. But David had attracted to him a group of mighty men. There's some 30 of them. And then there was 3 extras. And there they are, the 3 extras. And the story is told that when David was hiding in a cave by the name of Adullam, and this is only part of it, it's a whole network of caves, he attracted a group of valiant warriors around him. And one day, while perhaps sitting in this cave, drinking the brackish water that was dribbling out from amongst the rocks, David lamented to himself, "Oh, if only I could have a drink of water from my hometown of Bethlehem, from the well at the gate of my hometown of Bethlehem." And you know how perhaps you've grown up in a certain place and you like just the taste of the water that's there. Well, 3 of his mighty men, and this story, for those of you who are interested, is found in the Bible in 2 Samuel chapter 23. Chronologically, it should follow in 1 Samuel 22, because David is hiding in this cave from King Saul. And when he says this, "Oh, if only I could have a drink from home," and 3 of his men overhear him say that, and they take it upon themselves to journey to Bethlehem, which was a distance of some 20 kilometres from where David was hiding in Adullam. There on the map is the cave where David was. There's Bethlehem over there. But it wasn't just a matter of going for a walk in the country and coming home with a billum full of water. They had to break through some Philistine defences to get to that well. And when they brought it back to David, David couldn't bring himself to drink from that water because he realised that these guys had gone at the risk of their lives. And he didn't mean for them to take him literally, that he wished he could have a drink. But such were the exploits. And if you want an interesting read, one afternoon, Sabbath afternoon, pick up your Bible, turn to 2 Samuel chapter 23, and read what some of these guys got up to. They were superheroes. You know, this week, the world at large is going to learn about the faith of a man who I think was a superhero. This is Desmond Doss. He was a Seventh-day Adventist who volunteered to be in the Army Medical Corps in the American Army in the Second World War. And his story, of course, has been put on the big screen thanks to Mel Gibson in his movie Hacksaw Ridge. And it tells the story of a man who did not believe in warfare, but wanted to do his bit to help his country. He didn't want his fellow men of his age go off to war, sacrifice their lives without him doing something to contribute to the war effort. And so when he was in boot camp, he refused to carry a gun. And of course his refusal to carry a gun landed him in some hot water with his commanding officers. But eventually they consented that he could go into battle without carrying a weapon. And in May of 1945, the regiment that he was in was sent to the Japanese island of Okinawa. And when they landed there, what faced them was an escarpment that was some 400 feet high. And those soldiers had to get up that escarpment on rope ladders. But the Japanese had been anticipating this assault for many, many months, and they had dug themselves in some very sophisticated defence systems. And in that environment, Desmond Doss willingly ran into the hellfire of war to save his fellow man. Not once, not twice, not 3 times. In fact, the army says he saved more than 100 men. Desmond, who's a very humble man, said no, it was probably only around 50. When they eventually read his citation for the honour that he got, they compromised and said it was 75. But his fellow comrades know he rescued a lot of men. And Desmond worked out a way of getting the injured down that escarpment. He made a harness out of ropes and he lowered them over the edge. He did all this while there were bullets flying all around him. And each time he went back to get another wounded comrade, he would say, "Please, Lord, help me get just one more. Help me get just one more." And each time he went back, he brought back one of his fellow soldiers who in boot camp had ridiculed him as a coward for not carrying a gun. But he was anything but a coward. Eventually they recognised, they had a new appreciation for this man who went out into the field of battle to risk his life that they may have life. A couple of days later, they had to, that's the actual escarpment they had to get over. A couple of days later, they had to go back. They had failed in their attempt to secure this ridge. Hence the name, Hacksaw, because the Americans would go forward and the Japanese would push them back. And the Americans would go forward and the Japanese would push them back. Hence the name, Hacksaw Ridge. A couple of days later, his platoon had to go back up. And they delayed their departure while Desmond had his morning devotions. You see, he was so committed to God that he wouldn't even go into the day without first having his daily devotions. And his whole platoon was prepared to wait for Desmond to read his Bible and say his prayers. It actually happened to be a Sabbath morning on this occasion. Well, Desmond himself this time was injured that day. And as he was being carried off the battlefield on a stretcher, he saw someone who was more wounded than he was. And he asked if he could be put down and they would help the man who was in more strife than he was. While he was on the ground, a sniper shot him in the arm. And he made up a splint for himself and then crawled the 300 yards back to safety by himself. But Desmond lost something that day in the battle. Something very dear to him. No, he didn't lose his life, and no, he didn't lose his sweetheart. And yes, ladies, there is romance in this movie. And thank God for that, because in the mayhem of war, there is always romance. And that gives life its meaning. Desmond lost his Bible. In the middle of all the heat of that battle, somehow, out of his jacket pockets, he lost his Bible. Can you imagine how difficult that would be to recover? His fellow soldiers thought so much of him and Desmond's faith that at the risk of their own lives, they went back onto the battlefield that day and they found Desmond's Bible. Well, the war was over for Desmond. He spent the rest of the war recovering in an army hospital. But for his gallantry, he was awarded the highest military honour that the United States can bestow, the Congressional Medal of Honour. Desmond Doss truly was a superhero. This photo was taken in about the year 2000. Desmond died in 2006, aged 87. If he was still alive today, he would be 97 years of age. But young children, adventurers and pathfinders, one of the reasons that the Adventist Church invests so heavily in young people's ministry is that we want you to grow up and be a superhero for God. And what differentiates a superhero for God and a superhero in the comic books is that superheroes for God have faith as their secret weapon. May God bless you as you grow up in Him in this church. Amen.